Hi, I'm CP, welcome to Bespoke Unit, and in this video I'm reviewing Dolce Gabbana Light Blue. As with all our fragrance reviews, we'll be using the Bespoke Unit fragrance formula, a quantifiable review matrix that you can use at home. Just look in the description where you'll see a link that takes you to a guide which will teach you how to use it as well as provide you with some blank PDF versions. Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue has been on our radar for a long time. Indeed, it is an incredibly popular fragrance that was released in 2007. And recently, Jeremy Fragrance has been talking about the intense version. He's been banging on quite a lot about it, so we thought, okay, maybe it's time to look at the original and give it a formal review. As I mentioned earlier, Dolce Gabbana Light Blue was released in 2007, and the nose behind it was Heriberto Morillas, a legend of the perfumery industry, and is also the nose behind fragrances including Armani's Acqua di Gio, Yves Saint Laurent's M7, and Givenchy Pour Homme, as well as many others. It is an aromatic citrus fragrance, in this case an eau de toilette, although there are a variety of flankers that have been released in the 13 years since it was launched. And of course, before I go any further, the batch code on this, so we're all on the same page, is 9189EM. Alright, 2 sprays on the back of the hand. Let's just let that slightly evaporate before we move on. I'm going to compare with the notes here on the Bespoke Unit fragrance formula that I took from some samples earlier on, and we'll see how we get on. So Light Blue opens up with a distinctive citrus accord. This consists of some bitter grapefruit as well as a soft bergamot composition. It includes a crisp note of juniper, and you do detect a tiny bit of black pepper in there as well. However, the black pepper really starts to show itself in the heart, and this is a more aromatic aspect of the fragrance. The heart really starts to express aromatics, especially rosemary, but you may detect a little bit of thyme or indeed some savory in there as well, and some fragrant rosewood, which adds substance to the heart as well. As you make your way to the base, you'll start to really pick out those aquatic aspects, and that's mostly through the ambergris, which is a white musk, traditionally whale vomit, but although these days is largely synthetic. The ambergris will have hints of pipe tobacco, some musk, a little bit of sea breeze and wood in there, and you do have some earthy oak moss as well. And there is just a little hint of olibanum, which is a type of incense, sometimes known as frankincense, although I believe that they're slightly different. And in this case, it delivers a distinctively conifer pine essence rather than a balsamic sweetness. The overall life cycle isn't overly sophisticated. You do get a quite classic dry down from the head all the way down to the base. As for the performance, it is admittedly quite fleeting. The longevity is very short. You're going to have to douse yourself in this for it to last longer. However, I have heard through other reviewers that the intense version lasts significantly longer. The sillage, though, while it does last, is very good. It leaves the wearer with an excellent trail behind them. This is probably because this is largely composed of volatile compounds. These are the more summery citrus notes. They tend to evaporate very strongly and very violently while they last, but then they don't last as long. And the projection provides you with a decent scent bubble indeed. I'd say that you get a good meter of projection if you really covered yourself in it. However, I wouldn't over-applicate. Instead, get a travel atomizer and top yourself up regularly. You don't want to be that guy who you can smell before he enters the room. In terms of the fragrance's seasonality, as you probably guessed and as you probably heard elsewhere, this is a distinctively summertime fragrance. This is ideal for hot weather. You could probably wear it as well during the late springtime when the temperatures start to increase a little bit. However, it is most effective during the summer, and furthermore, winter and autumn probably not very well suited for this fragrance either. Instead, if you like Dolce & Gabbana, go for the one that would be much more appropriate for the colder months. Indeed, the life cycle isn't overly elaborate. However, it is a little bit more sophisticated than, for example, Chrome by Ozaro. This was a fragrance that actually, it really made me think of this being a distinctively aquatic and refreshing fragrance. There were some similarities with Chrome. Nautica is another one that it's quite similar to. And of course, Davidoff Cool Water being really the flag bearer of those aquatic fragrances that started in the late 80s, early 90s. Personally, I would prefer something like Kenzo pour Homme. Kenzo pour Homme will focus more on the aromatics, the seaweed and the woodiness that you would associate with the seaside, with the beach and with the hot weather, whereas things like Zara Chrome, Dolce Gabbana Light Blue and Nautica really focus in on that cologne, those aldehydic aspects that can seem somewhat fatty if you put on too much, or in the real high heat, if it evaporates too quickly, it gives this kind of dish soapy, clean, synthetic, cloying note instead. However, light blue is a little bit more sophisticated, as I mentioned. It's a little bit more refined, so it doesn't tend to do this quite as much. That being said, when I did test it at one point, I did get this slightly sour note, which when I was wearing it throughout a whole day, which isn't overly pleasant, but I imagine it was just me who could pick that out. I don't think this was something that my entourage noticed. As for the third-party feedback, as you are probably aware, or maybe not, this is an exceedingly popular fragrance. Lots of people enjoy it. It is very well known among the fragrance community and even the more everyday layman fragrance-wearing grand public. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people find it to be a little bit overrated. Some people will compare it, for example, to dish soap. They don't dislike it, but they find it a little bit bland or maybe overused. It could be a victim of its own success in that sense. Otherwise, it is often praised for its clean and refined and summery notes, this lovely blend of citrus and some fragrant rosewood that is contrasted against notes like pepper and oak moss. It seemed to be more popular among a younger crowd, not too young, that being said. People in their 20s tended to gravitate towards this a lot more. In their 30s, these were people who probably in their 20s when it came out will still continue to wear it. It is indeed very inoffensive and very clean, which makes it a great professional fragrance, which we'll talk about in the impressions in just a minute. As for women, so, you know, everyone is constantly chasing after compliments with fragrances rather than using them as an expression of their own personal identity. Indeed, this is supposedly a compliment monster. I've had some pleasant comments when I've asked people for them, and they said, yes, it does smell very nice, it's very pleasant, but it's mostly been along the lines of it being rather inoffensive and quite refreshing, rather than it being overly seductive or anything of a romantic or alluring fashion. This leads me on to the overall impressions of the fragrance, which talks about the high-level usage thoughts. For instance, the most appropriate age range for wearing this fragrance. As I mentioned earlier, it's particularly popular for men in their 20s. Indeed, this is probably the most appropriate age range. However, it can easily be worn by people in their teens, in their 30s, in their 40s. But I would say late 20s, early 30s would be the most, the target market of this fragrance. As for the time of day, this is a great daytime fragrance. You could probably wear it in the early evening as well, but when the sun's out is its most suitable moment. And in terms of occasion, I would say definitely this is an office fragrance for the summertime. However, you could also wear it casually or when going out or at a day on the beach. But this is a great professional fragrance, especially if you work in a hot area. And finally, the masculinity. This isn't overbearing. This is certainly not a dominant fragrance. It does have some moderate masculine notes. For example, the ambergris and the rosewood are classic masculine notes. But this is not going to be something that is too mild either. Nevertheless, it could be worn by some women. There is a women's version, which is a touch fruitier, available as well. So make that of what you will. The bottle is particularly distinctive. It has a really nice smoked glass design, quite minimalist. The cap, plastic cap that just pulls off with a good atomizer that provides a nice thick mist. As for the packaging, which I have right here, I find it to be a little bit unusual, to be honest. This kind of furry felt packaging is a little bit original. It's not something that you see every day. I imagine the idea behind it was to really bring home that oceanic concept, especially that the felt has different colors, it has nice hues, and maybe you could compare it to a dolphin or some sort of aquatic mammal. Who knows? But it's different, that's for sure. As for the value of this fragrance, it tends to retail for about $70 for 100 ml. However, you can get it for a lot less, depending on where you look. For instance, this one is a 50 ml and it was picked up for $46 through the retailers that you can see in the link below. To conclude, yes, Light Blue is an exceedingly popular fragrance, and for good reason. It's a very safe option with a balanced and harmonious summertime bouquet. It's very pleasant, it's inoffensive, quite suitable for professional wear. It also offers decent value for money, and it's a safe option overall. It's quite refined compared to a lot of other summertime fragrances, which tend to be a little bit too heavy on the cologne or on the fatty aldehydes. In this case, if you want to go for something that performs better, people are saying the Intense offers much better longevity and delivers those notes for a far greater period of time. Personally, I would go for something like Kenzo Pour for summer. I find this to be a lot more unique. Indeed, one thing that people have commented on, and I feel is somewhat true as well, is that Light Blue is somewhat lacking in identity, and it doesn't really find a way to express its uniqueness as much as it could. Anyway, that's all from me today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, don't forget to subscribe, and until then, head to bespoke.com and see all the other men's lifestyle subjects that we cover. Until then, take care.